The first sign was the insomnia. Sleep, once a comforting escape, became a dreaded abyss. Each night the fear grew. Darkness pulsed with unseen terrors. Then came the dreams. Vivid, grotesque, they clung to the edges of consciousness. Familiar places twisted into chilling parodies. Shadows whispered his name. He was back. Freddy Krueger, a malevolent entity, reborn for a new generation, lurking in the digital static, a nightmare given new life. The air itself felt colder, charged with an unseen menace. A low hum vibrated in the silence, a discordant symphony of dread. No one was safe. Meant to come. It was a sound that heralded the arrival of the nightmare, a chilling reminder that in the world of dreams there was no escape from Freddy Krueger. The girl found herself in a familiar place, the local park. It was a place she had visited countless times, a sanctuary of laughter and joy during her childhood. But tonight, it felt different. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, and the once vibrant playground now seemed like a ghost of its former self. But the swings hung crooked, rusted chains groaning in the oppressive silence. They creaked with every slight movement, as if whispering secrets of forgotten times. The paint on the swings was chipped and faded, a stark contrast to the bright colors she remembered. It was as if the playground itself had aged and decayed, mirroring the fear that now gripped her heart. The merry-go-round was still, its painted horses now grotesque and sinister. Their once cheerful faces were now twisted into eerie grins, their eyes seeming to follow her every move. The metal of the merry-go-round was cold and uninviting, a far cry from the warm, sunny days she had spent riding it. It was as if the playground had been transformed into a nightmarish version of itself. A chill wind whispered through the empty swings, carrying the faint scent of burning flesh. The fog that had settled over the playground added to the eerie atmosphere, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The swings moved slightly in the wind, their chains clinking softly, a haunting melody that sent shivers down her spine. The scent of burning flesh was faint but unmistakable, a reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. Fear tightened its grip, a cold dread seeping into her bones. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps, and her heart pounded in her chest. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind, a deep, bone-chilling cold that seemed to emanate from within her. Her eyes darted around the playground, searching for any sign of movement, any hint of the danger that she knew was lurking nearby. She saw him then, a fleeting shadow against the distorted landscape. His figure was barely visible through the thick fog, but she knew it was him. Freddy. The name sent a jolt of terror through her, and she felt her legs tremble. He was a figure from her darkest nightmares, a presence that had haunted her for as long as she could remember, and now he was here, in the playground that had once been her safe haven. Freddy. His laughter echoed across the deserted playground, a mocking counterpoint to her racing heartbeat. It was a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling the air with a sense of dread. The laughter was cruel and taunting, a reminder that she was not alone, that she was being watched. It was a sound that made her blood run cold, and she knew that she had to get away. She tried to run, her breath catching in her throat. Her legs felt heavy, as if they were made of lead, and every step was a struggle. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic, as she pushed herself to move faster. The fear was overwhelming, a suffocating presence that made it difficult to think, to focus on anything other than the need to escape. But the ground seemed to shift beneath her feet. The once familiar paths of the playground now twisted and turned in ways that made no sense, creating a disorienting maze. She stumbled, her footing unsure, as the landscape around her seemed to warp and change. It was as if the playground itself was conspiring against her, trapping her in a nightmarish labyrinth. The familiar park had become a labyrinth of fear. Every turn led to another dead end, another twisted path that seemed to go nowhere. The playground that had once been a place of joy and laughter was now a prison, a place where her worst fears had come to life. She could feel the walls closing in, the sense of hopelessness growing with every step. There was no escape from Freddy's playground. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut, and she felt a wave of despair wash over her. She was trapped with no way out, and the knowledge that Freddy was out there, watching, waiting, made it all the more terrifying. The playground had become a place of nightmares, and there was no waking up from this one. The line between dream and reality blurred. The terror that plagued her sleep seeped into her waking hours. Whispers followed her, shadows danced at the edge of her vision. She felt his presence, a constant, watchful menace. Her sanctuary, her mind, had been invaded. Sleep offered no escape, only a deeper descent into Freddy's madness. Panic clawed at her throat, a scream trapped within. She was losing herself, the boundaries of her sanity crumbling with each passing moment. The fear was a living thing now, feeding on her doubt, growing stronger with every fleeting thought. She was trapped in a nightmare, and the monster knew her name. Section 5. Freddy's Twisted Game. The rules were simple, brutally so. There was no room for error, no second chances. The stakes were higher than anyone could imagine, and the consequences were dire. This wasn't about survival, it was about enduring the torment. Freddy's game was designed to break the spirit, to shatter the mind. Each participant was a pawn in his sadistic play, and the only way out was through sheer willpower and mental fortitude. Every fear, every buried secret was a weapon in Freddy's hands. He knew how to dig deep into the psyche, unearthing the darkest corners of the mind. The game was a psychological battlefield, and Freddy was the master tactician. He reveled in the anticipation, drawing out the terror, savoring every whimper, every plea for mercy. The more his victims suffered, the more powerful he became. It was a twisted symbiosis, a dance of fear and power that left no room for hope. This digital realm was his to command, a twisted reflection of the waking world. Here he could manipulate reality, bending it to his will. The boundaries between the real and the unreal blurred, creating a nightmarish landscape where nothing was as it seemed. Each dream was a layer deeper, a descent into a personal hell tailored to exploit her deepest fears. Freddy's game was a labyrinth of horrors, each turn revealing a new terror. There was no end in sight, only an endless spiral into madness. The digital world offered no escape, only an amplified echo chamber of her terror. Every scream, every cry for help was magnified, reverberating through the virtual corridors. It was a prison of the mind, with Freddy as the warden. He was the architect of her nightmares, the conductor of her fear. Every move, every decision was orchestrated to maximize her suffering. Freddy's game was a symphony of terror, and he was the maestro, conducting with a cruel precision. And the game had only just begun. The true horror was yet to come, as Freddy's twisted imagination knew no bounds. Each moment was a prelude to the next, a never-ending cycle of fear and despair. The players were trapped in his web, with no hope of escape. Section 6. Facing the fear. She knew the truth now. Running was futile. Freddy fed on her fear, her despair his sustenance. There was only one way to end this confrontation. She delved deep into the heart of the nightmare, each step fueled by a growing rage. Fear remained, but it was tempered by a steely resolve. The digital landscape shifted, morphing into a grotesque mockery of her childhood home. He waited within, his laughter echoing through the empty halls. This time, she wouldn't let fear paralyze her. She would fight back. This nightmare would end. Section 7. The final playground. The air crackled with energy, the digital landscape warping and twisting under the weight of their confrontation. Freddy, his grin a grotesque mockery of amusement, lunged. The fight was a blur of motion, a desperate struggle for survival. Each parry, each blow struck, fueled by a primal need to break free from the nightmare. He taunted her, his voice dripping with malice, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Fear was still a weapon, but now it was hers to wield. The digital world around them fractured, the edges of reality fraying under the strain of their battle. This was the final playground. Section 8. No longer afraid. She met his gaze, her fear replaced by a cold fury. He faltered, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. For the first time, he sensed a shift in the balance of power. The fear that had sustained him, fueled his reign of terror, began to dissipate. In its place, he saw defiance, a refusal to be controlled. His form flickered, his laughter turning into a desperate screech. The digital landscape crumbled around them, the nightmare losing its grip. She had faced her fear, and in doing so, she had disarmed him. The nightmare was ending. Section 9. Echoes in the dark. She woke with a gasp, the remnants of the nightmare clinging to her like cobwebs. The digital world was gone, the terror replaced by a weary relief. But some scars run deep. The fear might be gone, but the memory of Freddy's playground lingered. A shadow in the static, a whisper in the dark. She knew that the battle was won, but the war was far from over. Freddy Krueger might be vanquished, but the digital world, a breeding ground for fear, remained. And somewhere in the darkest corners of the web, a new nightmare was waiting to be born. The cycle continues.